Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to our first look overview of Corvette Command, designed by Alan Eagle and published by War Diary Publications. This game takes you to May 1941 and puts you in charge of a Corvette-class escort. Your mission is to escort Allied convoys across the Atlantic Ocean. In a campaign that can last 2 years of World War II, you'll be going up against mechanical failures, inclement weather, and storms, and of course, your greatest nemesis, the German U-boats. Let's jump in and take a look at the components and offer some initial impressions on this game. So we've got Corvette Command spread out in all its glory in front of us. We've got some player aids, a small set of counters, rulebook, a bunch of dice, 3 different types of cards, and they're sitting on the playmat. And we'll take a look at each one of these components individually shortly. But let's do a quick overview of gameplay first. Now, the heart of gameplay in Corvette Command is the convoy. And basically, you're going to be playing the role of a single Corvette escort, leading across an abstract representation of a number of ships. So you'll get, say, the 30, 40 ships in your convoy, and you're going to be taking them across the Atlantic, preventing them from getting blown apart by U-boats. And this convoy, in essence, is a 30 to 90 minute experience. So that's the gameplay experience on that convoy. And it represents anywhere, I think, from a week to maybe 2 weeks of time, depending upon the route you take and how fast your convoy is and the weather and elements that can kind of play an effect on the speed of, and the historical speed of that game. Then the second layer this game has is its campaign game, where you're going to have a turnaround time of a number of days, say roughly a week or a few days, and then you're going to be leading another convoy back across the Atlantic, suffering attacks by U-boats, and you kind of lather, rinse, repeat. Starts in May of 1941 and ends at the end of May 1943, so basically 25 months of action that you'll be doing this escort. And if each convoy and turnaround time looks like it's 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks, you get a rough idea on how long the whole campaign would be, which is really big. If you're talking maybe 40, I'm kind of guessing here, maybe 40 convoys that should be leading if you play the entire 25-month campaign, maybe more. So that's roughly that many hours if you kind of abstractly kind of guess that one convoy is going to take about an hour to play out. So there's a long, meaty campaign in here if you want to play through the entire thing. Now, there's nothing preventing you from playing a year or playing one mission or playing 10 mission, playing one convoy or 10 convoys, whatever you'd like to do. So you've got some different representations on how to play this game. And then just to clarify, unit scale is you're in charge of a single Corvette. Your convoy is represented as an entire group, and you're going to get attacked individually by U-boats, but they could come in sequence if they're part of a wolf pack, which can be up to a maximum of 3 U-boats in the game. So you could have a number of U-boat attacks in one individual sector of the map here, depending upon how luck and fate treats you. Let's do a quick overview now of the mechanics. First up, weather is modeled, both in terms of how it influences your convoy speed, it can break things, and it also influences U-boat tactics in combat. If you play the campaign game, you can always play a single patrol, but if you play the heart of the game, which is really that campaign game, there are technology advances. So from the span of the beginning of May 1941 to May 1943, there's going to be a number of elements in gameplay that will change, and technology advances. So things like hedgehogs will come into play to give you better attack capacity against U-boats. HFDF, so HFDF, the high frequency detection finder element for searching for U-boats, will come into play. ASDIC will also come into play. So you're going to get better tools to hunt U-boats as the game goes along. The U-boats themselves will also have, I think there's 1 or 2 technology advances that they're going to get that's going to make it harder to actually kind of sink them and take them out of action. You have crew skill enhancements. We'll take a look at those as we look at elements of the map and the gameplay, the game mat here. There are also random events modeled, so you can have, there's a whole sheet of random events that can happen if you enter an area and the fates so shine in that direction. Your Corvette can get damaged by not only the weather, but on rare occasion, a U-boat might actually target your Corvette and you could be the subject of a U-boat attack. You could actually get sunk on a convoy. The U-boat combat is modeled to a fairly interesting degree. There's different ranges that the U-boat will take. It'll come on the surface or come under the water. There's variable U-boat tactics, variable U-boat skills, and you're trying to take the U-boat out of action as it's trying to sink your ships in the convoy in a fairly drawn out and fairly kind of elaborate, in a good way, U-boat attack sequence that we'll take a look at as we look at the player aids. Let's jump in and take a look at the rulebook. Now, as a way of historical context for this particular game,
This game was a print and play game that was published about 3 years ago and has now been amped up and re-envisioned in this full production version from War Diary Publications. The rules, on the whole, they are 12 pages long, and I found them in sections fairly clear and fairly easy to decipher. I am struggling with them in a couple of places. The one place that would have been really nice would be have to had some of these terms defined, so it assumes kind of an understanding of anti-submarine warfare in World War II. So things like HF/DF, which pronounced Huff Duff, high frequency direction finder, is a term that's thrown about, but it isn't defined anywhere. They don't really tell you what it is. You can kind of figure it out, but it would be nice. Likewise, very early in the book, it's talking about ASDIC, I think anti-submarine detection skill, which would again be nice to define. Hedgehogs as well, I think. I'm familiar with them, but if you're not familiar with World War II submarine combat, that could be something a player might not know. So it would be really nice to have some of those terms defined before you get to them, to talk a little bit about what they are, to set the context for the learning. The biggest place I've struggled a little bit with these rules in, though, is connecting some of the rules to how they connect to the components and the systems for tracking them. For example, the biggest one I'm not quite sure of is the game mentions how much time it takes to move through a box in a particular zone in the map, like a day, day and a half, or 2 days. But I don't see any system in the components or the player aids for tracking time. So I don't know if it's something I'm missing or it's something that's not in the game. In either case, it would be nice to know that, but it would be really nice to have a system, for example, for like tracking movement and time passage in a campaign that's going to last 2 years. Or do you have to do that externally on your own? That would be nice to know. Likewise, there are some crew skill enhancements where it says for each member of the crew that over the previous 3 missions has successfully executed a skill, then you can roll for an advancement on every third, after every third convoy, not necessarily mission, but convoy. And I don't see a system really for tracking that as well. Likewise, there are counters on the map here. We can see the damage, hull damage for the Corvette, but I don't know if I can find the counters for putting there. There are some damage counters, but I think those are the U-boat counters. So there are a few things and elements of gameplay that I'm a little bit unsure of as to how they're represented and how they connect between the rules as they're explained here and then what actually you do to execute those rules in the game. Now, a couple of caveats here. First, I've read rule books where I felt like I have understand them absolutely perfectly clear, and then I've gone off and started to play the game and I have no idea what to do and realize there's a lot of gaps in the rules. I've had other situations where I've read the rules and been a little bit confused, but then everything sorts itself out once I start to play. So these issues could very well clean themselves up as I kind of start playing through the game. The second thing I would add is that I had a question on the setup that I wasn't quite sure about, and I posted a question on Board Game Geek about that. And then I believe the designer is, I'm going to guess, England or somewhere in Europe, had a full answer the next morning when I woke up with some graphics and some images explaining it, and I understood it completely. So it was great to see the designer's support for the game. That to me is the biggest element, because I don't mind getting stuck, but if you get stuck and you can't get unstuck, that's when it gets frustrating to me. So really nice to see that support behind the game. And he did mention in his answer that he's going to be creating some more videos once his copy of this new version shows up. And there are some videos on Board Game Geek explaining how different things are done with the print and play version. So that sounds like those videos are going to be upgraded as well. So looks like we're going to get really excellent support from the designer, which to me is the ultimate thing. I can sort through some ambiguous areas on the rules as long as the designer's there helping me get through them with answers on Board Game Geek, or someone's there helping me get through them with answers on Board Game Geek. So a couple issues with the rules. Still I haven't rendered final judgment or evaluation on them. To complexity wise, I would give them a 3 out of 10. It's not a super hard game. Solitaire, of course, this is a complete solitaire game. I haven't mentioned that, I guess, clearly until now. Complete solitaire game. You're only in charge of 1 Corvette. I don't see an option really for taking 2 Corvettes and playing it collaboratively like that. It's really designed as a single player experience. Here's our counters. We have 88 laser cut counters. These are nice and sharp, 5/8 of an inch counters printed on both sides with various functions on both sides. The majority of these counters here are the sector counters. So we can see here, these are for the Canadian sector, and these basically cover the boxes on the map. And then when your convoy goes into these, you flip it over to see what kind of encounter it is. In this middle zone, these ones with the moon and the dark gray here, these are the air gap, where you are in that zone in the Atlantic where your air escort and air cover can't cover the convoy. So this is where the U-boat feasts. And basically, as a convoy goes into one of the sectors, you're going to flip over these markers and you're going to see what's underneath, either nothing, blank, or U-boat attack, or random event. And we can see these 6 here with U-boats on them. These are all on the other side of the counters here for these air gap counters. So that's kind of that middle zone where it's going to be fraught with peril and you're really at the mercy of the U-boat hunters here. This other big chunk down here is for your skills on your crew. So as your crew enhances skill, they can go up all the way up to a value of 6 as a maximum. And then we have things here like the convoy counter, remember the weather marker. There is a series of random events that could result in some tokens you get, some damage markers and other elements to help control gameplay. But really nice set of counters. I really like the visual design on this game. This is such a fresh, clean vision of something. And I love the way they have used the blue and the red in terms of, and the red for U-boat signifying danger. It just feels like a really sharp and polished design. So kudos to the designer on this one for really giving this a fresh artistic look. Let's walk through our player aids in what might be my favorite player aid of all time, hitting my coder kind of hobbyist behind me, is this flowchart for the U-boat attack sequence. I mean, this is extremely geeky in terms of its yes, no, and you branch off and tell you, but it's so helpful because it tells you exactly what the order is and what to do and where your yes and no splits are and how things go back and forth. So I think I'm going to have this by my side as I play the game to really enhance and reduce confusion as to try to figure out what to do at a given point in time in a U-boat attack. So really, this is really, really nice. This one here, I laugh because I probably spent an hour as I was looking at the rules trying to figure out what the various counters are. And one of the things I wrote down to be really nice if there was a section of the rules that told you what each counter was. And then literally as I started to make this video, I found this piece of paper. So I was like, oh, okay, that one's on me. So yeah, this basically tells you what all the counters do. There's still a couple of things I'm not sure of, like how do you track damage on your Corvette for those hull hits, and this area damage, I'm not quite sure. You're trying to measure some reduction in skills on U-boats too, and I'm not quite sure how you track those. But we'll talk about, I'm sure those will sort themselves out as they go forward. Next up, we have some mechanical failure and ship damage tables. These apparently, I think, will probably be used quite often, so it kind of walks you through that. And then an overall sequence of play as separate from the U-boat attack sequence as to how to kind of get your game going and get underway. Then we have an operations record book. This is, I think, for a single convoy here. You get one of these, so I'm not sure if you're supposed to, I would imagine maybe you're supposed to copy this, or perhaps there's some available online to print them out so you have more of these, or this is almost provided as just kind of a historical counterpart, and to kind of figure out how you're supposed to use things. I mean, I can see you're tracking time here. There isn't that system for tracking the days, but you could create an entire historical record for your convoy. And a lot of things I think can happen here, as can be evident by these random events. So this is the random event table, and you have a 1d20 to basically dial these up. So lots of different things with some side elements to them that can happen to your ship. Icebergs. What else do we have here? Air raid, coded message, splice the main brack. So all kinds of different random events that can give each convoy its own flair and its own touch, depending upon which one of these that you trigger. Let's take a look at our cards. Again, I love the design. On the left-hand side, I've put out 4 of the U-boat cards. This is the back. So when you encounter a U-boat, you're going to draw one of these cards off the top of what is the largest deck. There's probably, I'll say maybe 20 or so of these. And that's going to tell you the characteristics of the U-boat and the U-boat attack. So here is a Type 7 U-boat, for example. The attack is going to be long, medium, then close. So it's going to start, I think, again, I'm not 100% of the way through the rules, but start at long range. It's got an attack skill of 4 and evade skill of 4. And here is where I think you track the damage, but I'm not quite sure yet how. Whereas we can see this U-boat here, Type 7, is going to come in medium and close. It's got a lesser attack skill. This one down even here, that's just off the bottom, we can't see it, but has an attack skill of 2. So each U-boat encounter is going to be different. You're going to get some that are quite a bit better So if we can bring one in here, this one looks pretty nasty. Attack skill of 6, evade skill of 6, and attacking from close range. He is right in the convoy's face here. So these look like a lot of tension. They're going to be involved. Again, I really like the design on these and how they're represented. Then there are 3 of these cards. These are the approach into Liverpool or out of Liverpool that you're going to be drawing. So you are, for example, you have to go out of the western approaches this way on that northern route if you draw this card. And this is what you draw after you draw your convoy card here. So the convoy card is what you're going to draw as you start up your next convoy. It's going to tell you the speed of the convoy, the starting location or ending location, depending upon if you're coming west to east or east to west. And then, of course, the starting location is always going to be Liverpool. But some of them here, again, these are both going to the same place. This is a faster convoy that's going to Halifax instead of to St. John's. So these are basically the cards that you're going to be used to set up your patrol, and these other cards are for the U-boat attacks. Before we jump in and take a look at the map in its entirety, just to let you know, there are a bunch of dice. 4 black dice, 1 white die, all 6-sided, a 10-sided die, and then a 20-sided die. So you've got a good collection of dice here, and different events and different things that happen are going to demand different usage of the dice. The biggest of which we'll take a look at when we see really kind of one of the heart of the mechanics of the game in terms of execution, which is active versus passive skills, and we'll see that now as we head to the map. So here is our playmat. Now this is 17 inches by 22 inches, and basically the map part of it here is the middle. And as we mentioned earlier, there are kind of 3 zones to it. You've got the Canadian sector, for which you're going to have air cover, and you're going to be either starting or arriving at St. John's and Halifax. Then this air gap where you're at the mercy of the U-boat attacks. Then the western approaches that are going to take you into Liverpool at some point. And so you're basically going to be moving your convoy across this map section and running into encounters along the way. This is the spot for the U-boat deck. Here's how you keep track of damage on your Corvette. This is the short range, medium range. You're going to be putting the U-boat in here, I think, to measure how far away it is from the convoy. Got a place for events, and then a bunch of little tables and trackers down below. Down here is where you're going to be tracking the different characteristics of your crew skill. So in the basic game, there are 5-6 of these here, and then there are some other ones, radar skills that come on turn, and hedgehog and huffduff that come into play as the campaign lengthens and these technologies get built into the gameplay. I do want to show this over here, which is, I think, a heart of how a lot of the actions in the game get executed. We do have here depth charge patterns, so you have 25 depth bars, and then a weather tracker, and then some information basically on Aztec tech detection and U-boat attacks. Some high frequency pieces of information on the map here. But let's take a look down here. Overall, though, just before we do that, I really like this design. It's so fresh, it's so clean. A lot of just visual pop to this in terms of how this put this together to really give it a fresh kind of modern day look, and yet representative of the grittiness of naval combat in the North Atlantic here. But let's jump in now and take a look at this table and show how this works. So I wanted to show this chart here because this is really, I think, the heart of a lot of the game execution, and it's really an elegant way to capture a lot of different functions in one single chart. So instead of sending you to a lot of charts, and in the rules there are a number of charts, so there are still charts here, but this chart in itself enables the designer to capture a lot of actions with the use of only one chart. And at its heart here is this active skill against this passive skill. And you can see the active skill has got a rating from anywhere from 1 to 20. Likewise, the passive is 1 to 20. And the active skill, for example, might be something like looking for a U-boat, trying to find where the U-boat is. And the passive skill in that case would be the U-boat's evasion skill. And the example the rulebook gives is, say the active skill for the search element of the convoy or the Corvette is a 2, and the evasion skill of the U-boat is a 3, you're going to cross-reference those and get a number. Here we would get 9. And that means on a 20-sided die, you have to roll a 9 or less in order to succeed at that active skill. And so this allows this chart to perform a lot of different functions in the game. It seems really clever. I'm excited to kind of give it a try. So it really lets you, instead of having 30 tables to do something, you've got a lot less. Now there are specific tables and a lot of different die rolls for different elements in the game that don't use this active versus passive, kind of opposed skill type of resolution. But this is really kind of, I think, a really clever mechanic to capture a lot of different gameplay elements in one chart. So there we are, an overview of Corvette Command, designed by Alan Eagle and published by War Diary Publications. I'm looking forward to getting this one to the table. As people know on the channel, I'm very much a fan of the solitaire submarine genre of games, especially games that allow you to have a campaign and skill advancement. It's checking a lot of boxes off for the things I like to see in a solitaire game, legacy elements between missions and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to giving this one a shot, and I'm looking forward to being on top of the ocean instead of under the ocean, where I've been usually up until now with this kind of subgenre, pun intended, type of game. Now, there is a couple of things to mention. Two. One is I will be creating a gameplay video for this. I'm not sure if I will show an entire mission, depending on how long it goes, but I want to show a chunk of gameplay to help people figure out if this might be a game you would enjoy playing. One thing that I do like to talk about in these games, and I want to mention it now just to be clear, I don't yet have a sense for player agency in the game. And by player agency, what I mean is how many decisions and how many meaningful decisions do you make that impact gameplay as a player. Often these types of solitaire experiences can be somewhat on rails, or they can have a very high degree of player agency, which means you're constantly making decisions that are meaningful in the outcome of the game. I don't really have a sense yet for how this one plays, whether it's on the lighter end of that scale or on the heavier end of that scale. I'll get a sense as I start to dig in and play, of course, and I'll comment on that in the gameplay video. And I will also say that I'm a fan of both types. I just want to know before I start to play what type of game I'm getting, because I know there are players that don't like the lighter games and don't like the heavier games, and it's kind of helpful to know as we dig in. But I don't have a sense yet for that. And so there we have it. I will put a link to the gameplay video as soon as it's ready. I'd be happy to entertain any questions in between then. Corvette Command from War Diary Publications. Thanks for watching, everybody.